You must have had to go to the bathroom from time to time.
That was a big part of the preparation, and and for a stunt like this, we for number one, we use a funnel, and and for number two, I switched up my diet, that week, and and we didn't, so none of that happened.
Okay,
We were safe there.
without going into too many details, you were not eating much bean dip before you did the dip in the bean dip.
Throughout the entire day, and between fasting the day before and not eating throughout the day, I did treat myself to
Testing. Good evening and welcome to the 2021 version of the Oswego Bears Senior Night. As we honor our three seniors, Amelia, Ashley, and Angelina. Give a round of applause for our three seniors. Amelia will be accompanied this evening by her parents, Rebecca and Michael Ashley, and her sisters, Beatrice and Clementine. Amelia plans to attend college next year and major in either international relations or chemical engineering. Amelia has played on Varsity for 5 years and played hockey since she was 4 years old. Amelia is also a member of the high school girls soccer and lacrosse programs. And Bob, Amelia's family tonight, Amelia, we're very proud of you and love you so much. Congratulations to Amelia and her family. How about round of applause? Congratulations, Amelia and family. Next up, we honor Angelina Souza. Angelina is a member by Souza and teaching writing. Angelina's plans include attending Human Community College next year and enter the veterinary technician program. This is Angelina's first year on the WBUC Varsity team. However, Angelina has been playing hockey since she was 12 years old. She currently works as a Beautiful picture, seniors and parents and families. If the seniors could come down by that banner that says thank you seniors, we're going to get one more picture. After this contest takes this one. Nice job, seniors. One
in Whitehorse. Shannon Phillips is fed up. Earlier this week, the Alberta MLA told us she's been looking for accountability from the Lethbridge police for years. It all started when two officers surreptitiously photographed her at a local diner in 2017 and then followed two of her companions. Later, access to information requests revealed that other officers had repeatedly looked up her name in police databases without stating any investigative purpose. Now Ms. Phillips says it's past time for accountability. But time is exactly what Lethbridge Police Chief Shaheen Medizadeh is asking for.
All I say is, as I've stated, we do take him very seriously. Information is power when you look at it. And the police is trusted with a lot of information about our citizens that we have in our databases. And any time that trust is violated by any employee is a serious matter. So that's all I can provide you at this time. But again, the matter is under investigation. Let's not make judgments before we actually have the facts. And once we have them, we are going to move forward with the way that that's responsible, legal, and with respect to the processes that we have in this country that we need to adhere to.
Are these allegations and are these investigations maybe bringing up some concerns that there's a bit of a culture problem within the LPS?
It all depends on what you define as a culture. I truly believe in this organization. After having served 6 months with this group, we have a lot of great people here. There are a lot of good men and women here who protect this community every day and do a lot of wonderful things. So let's not lose sight of that. But are we a perfect organization? No, I have not seen any perfect organization anywhere. Do we have people who sometimes make mistakes or toxic even when you go to that level? Absolutely. So when we make judgment, let's not make judgment on the whole organization and the institution based on wrongdoings of a few people. Let's just focus on those wrongdoings and hold those people accountable instead of putting the whole organization down, because a lot of good people, men and women here, are doing their best every day to serve this community. The community respects that trust them to doing their job. So we can't really, again, judge the whole organization, all the men and women here, based on wrongdoings of a few. We just have to be open-minded about that. But again, my commitment is we are working on those individuals. on those allegations, on a discipline process, to make sure we hold them accountable. And again, my only message is let's not make this into every employee's problem here, because there are a lot of good people here.
Lethbridge Police Service Chief Shaheen Medizadeh responding to allegations that Lethbridge officers improperly monitored NDP MLA Shannon Phillips. Venezuelans in the U.S. illegally can make themselves at home, for the next 18 months anyway. President Joe Biden implemented the Temporary Protected Status Order, or TPS. It gives thousands of people who fled Venezuela for the state's legal status to both stay and work in the country without fear of being deported, for now. Roberto Marrero is the former chief of staff to Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido, who's considered by many countries, including Canada and the U.S., to be Venezuela's legitimate president. We reached Mr. Marrero in Miami, Florida.
Mr. Marrero, how important is it that this new policy in the United States will allow Venezuelans to stay in the U.S. for now?
Well, that's very, very, very important. It's a big trump for Venezuelan people, because Venezuelan people used to be tourists, not to be immigrants. Now, because the regime of Maduro put a very big crisis on Venezuela, that's why we were forced to go outside to looking at opportunities.
When you say looking for opportunities, then the people many of them who are there are concerned about going back to Nicolas Maduro's Venezuela. What would happen to them? What is the concern for people going back to their country?
They make their life in risk, because there's not medicine, there's not light. For example, we have places in Venezuela, they have 1 day with a light, 1 day and a half with a light. We don't have gasoline. The gas, the oil. Venezuela used to be an oil country. Now we are not an oil country. We're doing only 10% of the production in the 20 years ago. Now in Venezuela, 1 liter, for example, the gallon of fuel, it can be like $7, $8. It's too expensive.
Then that's not the only thing. We know from the stories we have done on our show, United Nations says that up to 94% of people in Venezuela are now living in poverty. They don't have enough water, food, medicine. All of this isn't because of natural disaster. This is because of politics, right?
It's a disaster, that's right. It's very hard to explain that, but this is the reality. Venezuela is a disaster.
You yourself, you were arrested by Maduro's forces in March 2019. You spent time in what's considered to be Venezuela's largest torture center, the prison you were in. When did you go to the United States?
Yes, I was in the jail for a year and a half, because it was the former chief of staff of President Guaido. And then Maduro put me in the jail, and after political pressure for international countries, that's what I have to say. Thank you to Canada, but recognizing Juan Guaido, recognizing National Assembly, recognizing the crisis of the Venezuela people and supporting the democracy. United States, a lot of countries help and support, make a pressure. And that's why Maduro has to release like 100 political prisoners. I'm one of them. And after 1 month being in Venezuela, I can't go away to be with my family here in Miami, because my family get out of Venezuela 2 years ago. Before they put me in the jail, because I talked to my wife, you have to go, because it's a several risk for you and our son. And I have to be here with the president, because we are in a compromise with the democracy and the fighting of the Venezuelan release. And that's why they put me in the jail, and I come here in October last year.
Many people believe that after you were arrested, since you were the right-hand man to Juan Guaido, recognized as the interim president by countries like Canada, as you mentioned, that the suspicion was that he would be arrested next. what is happening with Mr. Guaido right now? What is he is in Caracas? Yes.
Guaido's in Caracas. He's doing the great job. He's fighting so hard for Venezuelan liberation and Venezuelan democracy. And I think he's doing right being there and put a face to Maduro dictatorship, to the Maduro regime, and facing to the war, what's real happening there in Venezuela. I always say that year and a half in the prison is not in vain because a lot of Venezuelan people is fighting there. And I'm sure it's a matter of time Venezuela will come back to democracy.
But you know that a number of parties are saying that part of the problems Venezuelans are facing, these sanctions are creating enormous difficulty for people in Venezuela, and
that's not true. The Venezuelan problem is not the sanctions. The common people there in Venezuela understand it very clear. The first sanction, the most terrible problem there in Venezuela is Maduro. The honest people have no problem with these restrictions. The biggest one is Nicolas Maduro. For example, the gasoline, the oil, it costs $0.50 a liter. The people pay $2. That's not the sanctions, it's the corruption. The corruption is the real problem in Venezuela. We have not electricity, we have not medicines, we have not food. It's not because the sanctions, because you can buy food and you can bring to Venezuela. You can go to Venezuela right now. You can, if one I can give you some info of the full of merchandise of food. The problem is that people have not the money for buy it.
Right.
Because they're poor people, because there's no job, because it's a political crisis. For example, now $1 in Venezuela is 1 billion bolivars.
The New York Times is reporting that the officials who briefed them about this plan to allow Venezuelans to stay in the United States, they said that that the Biden administration was reviewing whether to lift some of the economic sanctions that are possibly costing the Venezuelan government as much as $31 billion. What do you say to the Biden administration?
No, Biden administration don't say that. That is a personal opinion. This is not the State Department declaration. The Biden administration says the only way to make a solution in Venezuela is talking with Juan Guaido. I can give you what they say today with the ambassador of Venezuela in the United States, Carlos Vecchio.
So, okay, just so I clarify. So what you are hearing differently. You are not hearing what the reporters heard in their briefing.
No, because there are opinions. But the state of the United States Department and Joe Biden administration stay very close supporting Juan Guaido.
Do you plan to stay and live in the United States?
No, I don't plan that. Actually, I'm a tourist. I'm just waiting at the real time, the exact moment to do that, to go to my country and be happy with my family, my wife and my son in my country.
When do you think you
I'm
might
not belong here.
When do you think you might be able to go home?
When I was in the jail, I say every day, tomorrow I will be free. And now I'm free. Now I say tomorrow I'm going to be in Venezuela. And someday will be that day.
Mr. Marrero, I appreciate speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry for my English. I apologize.
Don't apologize. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Roberto Marrero is the former chief of staff to Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido. We reached him in Miami. Does it count as standing up for free speech if you then walk away from free speech? As we told you yesterday on...
Okay. Jose.
Defense, Rachel Payne. Defense, Lily Harper. And goalie Isabel Wells. And the rest of the Skaneateles Lakers. And now for the Oswego Buccaneers. Starting for the Oswego Lady Buccaneers. At forward, Alan. At forward, Angelina Susan. At forward, Ashley St. John. On defense, Jordan Rocio. On defense, Amelia Varsity. And playing goalie, the Oswego Buccaneers, Nia Dawson. And the rest of the Oswego Buccaneers. If everyone will please rise for the playing of our national anthem.
You can cut down too if you want.
inmates who, among other things, exposed their genitals, made sexually degrading comments, and threatened sexual violence. The lawsuit also alleges that higher-ups failed to take female employees' complaints seriously. A spokesman says the sheriff's office in Mobile, Alabama won't comment until Sheriff Cochran and attorneys have had time to review the federal lawsuit. Debbie Elliott, NPR News.
Prices at the consumer level took a bump up last month. The government saying its consumer price index rose 0.4%, much of that due to a rise in prices at the gas pump. On Wall Street, a mixed close. The Dow was up 434 points, but the Nasdaq fell 4 points. This is NPR. The U.S. budget deficit reached an all-time high last month, topping $1 trillion for the first 5 months of the fiscal year. The pool of red ink coming as spending to deal with the coronavirus pandemic rose well in excess of the amount of tax revenues coming in. Treasury says for the October through February period, the deficit was 68% larger than the roughly $625 billion recorded for the same period a year ago. Brazil's former President Lula da Silva addressing the nation after his graft convictions were overturned, telling Brazilians to disregard current President Jair Bolsonaro's positions on COVID-19. Catherine Osborne has the story.
Lula was out of Brazil's political spotlight until Monday, when a judge overturned 2 corruption sentences he was serving. He's now thought to be considering a run against Bolsonaro next year. In a televised speech, he lamented Brazil's coronavirus death toll, said the country lacks a government, and told Brazilians to take their COVID-19 vaccines and disregard Bolsonaro's health advice. Bolsonaro has long downplayed the risk of the virus and cast doubt on the effectiveness of vaccines. This week, Brazil saw its deadliest 24-hour period yet of the pandemic. COVID-19 killed almost 2,000 people in a day. For NPR News, I'm Catherine Osborne in Rio de Janeiro.
The University of California, Davis says it hopes to convince students to stay in place instead of going anywhere for spring break. University today saying students who choose to stay home during the March 22nd through 26th break will get $75 worth of gift cards. Qualified students need to promise to stay home and complete a COVID test. I'm Jack Spear, NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from iDrive, providing cloud backup, full system backup, and on-site iDrive appliance to protect PCs, Macs, and servers from data loss due to crashes and ransomware at iDrive.com/NPR and Americans for the Arts.
After endorsing Andrew Cuomo's successful gubernatorial bids in 2010, 2014, and 2018, the Albany Times-Union, the preeminent source of news for the Capital Region and beyond, and the governor's hometown paper, is calling on Cuomo to resign, citing his squandering of the public trust with the administration's handling of nursing home data. Quote, "It is time for Mr. Cuomo to resign, and for those who helped him deceive the public to go too," reads an editorial published in Sunday's print edition. The piece goes on to say that he lacks the credibility to lead in light of multiple sexual harassment allegations and is meddling into state ethics entities. To discuss the editorial, including its significance and how the paper's editorial board reached this position, we're joined by Casey Seiler, the editor of the Times-Union, who served as the paper's state editor for nearly 9 years. Welcome to the show, Casey.
Dave, good to talk to you, as always.
So what was the process internally of deciding to publish an editorial calling for the governor to resign, and when did those discussions start in earnest?
Well, the editorial board, and remember, what we're talking about is a group of a half dozen people. I am a member of the editorial board, but of course, since I'm the editor of the paper, I try to stand a little bit at a remove. I do not, as a practice, write the editorials. Those are handled by sort of diverse, talented writers on the editorial board who are not me. But in this case, while the editorial board has opined in recent weeks on all of the troubles facing Governor Cuomo, after the publication last Thursday night of the story,
Susan. between periods, can you help me move this? You can't see anything here. You can't see the other end of the ice, so I want to move it over there so I can at least pan back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Like where the figure skater is?
Yeah, you want to do it right now? Because if you carry the computer, I can carry everything else.
So I want to go and plug in?
It won't matter if it unplugs it, because it should be running on battery right now.
You want me to unplug it?
No, I'll come back and get it later. This all should stay, because you got to kind of stay close to me.
Okay, so you're not unplugging anything?
No, here. Maybe there I can.
I do not. Hold on.
Yep. We're going live. What's it look like right there?
Just like we're moving. You can't really see anything.
Jeez, you alright?
Yeah. You can fix that.
How about right here?
It's still pretty small.
Yeah.
I'm just afraid, will you get a good view from the side?
I hope so. Because you can't see anything there.
Geez, I fired one folder because I thought you had two ended.
Yeah, now it's going to be tough. I won't be able to get that angle down there. Boy.
Nope.
Still back to that corner where that guy is. Sorry.
Okay.
These people are probably watching just going, what is going on?
They'll be grateful in the end.
I'm going to stop right here if that's all right. Can I get right here?
Yeah, you're good, you're good. Okay, now go to the corner. Yeah, you can
that's
get
a lot
the corner.
better.
Here, hold this, I'll go give you that bench I walked into.
You want to grab that bench, bud?
Here's his ball.
Thank you, sir. They must have known you needed it.
I got text from Jimmy Psychic, so maybe
He's probably like, what's going on? That's better for sure.
Power though.
I'll do that. We'll shoot out after that. It's going to have to go in there when he opens up the door. Yeah. Oh, it is.
We'll have to move it when the Zamboni comes. John.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, thank you. stroking his. I'm all good. No, I think it's just picking up off the laptop. There's just no cord to it. We're good. Yeah.
My pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided by Destiny USA. Shopping, dining, and entertainment all in one location. For more information, go to www.destinyusa.com.
As we continue to battle the coronavirus, it's never been more true that listeners are WRVO's most important source of income. I'm station manager Bill Drake. We're already more than halfway through the Spring On Air fundraiser. Have you made your contribution? We're fundraising free right now, but you can give online at WRVO.org. Please make sure we have what we need to continue providing our community with the news and information we all need. Give as generously as you can at WRVO.org. Thank you.
While New York lawmakers have adopted numerous measures in recent years to make it easier to vote, whether it's no excuse absentees, automatic voter registration, or expanded days of early voting, there hasn't always been an emphasis on breaking down barriers to the polls, especially for black voters. And that history was recently outlined in the Daily News by our next guest, Van Goss, a history professor at Franklin and Marshall College and the author of the new book, The First Reconstruction, Black Politics in America from the Revolution to the Civil War. Welcome to the show, Professor.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, for starters, in terms of our education here, when could black New Yorkers first vote?
1777, in the first Constitution, which was adopted somewhere up the river because the city was occupied by the British. But New York, revolutionary New York, adopted a non-racial suffrage, and that opened the door to free black men, not to the thousands of enslaved black men, but there were free black men, and indeed, if you dig out local histories, there are some listed as freeholders especially in the sort of greater Albany, Schenectady region.
And throughout New York's subsequent history, did that part of the Constitution remain intact, or did it ever get tweaked in any way, shape, or form?
It got fundamentally revised in 1821 in what is widely regarded as one of the most important state constitutional conventions in the 19th century. In New York at that point, and seems so strange to us, actually had a two-tier suffrage, a very low bar, minimal rent paying, even in New York City, rent paying requirement to vote for the Assembly and for Congress, but a significant property requirement to vote for the state Senate or governor. And there was a big push in 1819, 20, 21 to get rid of that so that more ordinary small farmers, poor working men could vote for the governor. But the dominant political faction, who were called the Bucktails, Tammany Hall in New York City, and led by Martin Van Buren of Columbia County, they folded into this constitutional reform, getting rid of the large black electorate, because that black electorate had been voting against them and was quite substantial in many key counties. So in 1821, they opened up the suffrage for ordinary white men and closed it down for thousands and thousands of black men.
Today, when we talk about efforts to disenfranchise minority voters, we're usually discussing voter ID requirements or limited polling locations and hours. You've just described one example of disenfranchisement in the past in terms of writing it into the state constitution. What else has New York done in the past to make it more difficult or prohibit people of color from voting?
There were many other less constitutional means. A persistent issue for many, many decades in New York was attempts to disfranchise or exclude immigrants, specifically Catholic immigrants. Although Governor John Jay and the Jay family in general were great supporters of emancipation, Governor Jay passed the gradual emancipation law in 1799 and supported black voting rights, as did his family. Governor Jay was deeply hostile to Catholics voting. And in fact, as one of the writers, one of the three principal writers of the 1777 Constitution, he tried to exclude Catholics, because now you might say, how could he do this? Well, who would do that? Governor Jay was a Huguenot, meaning a French Protestant who had fled brutal, murderous repression by the Catholics in France. And he was part of a larger nativist anti-Catholic feeling that persisted well up to through the Civil War, even after the Civil War. Now, this never entered into law, at least in New York. In other states, there were attempts to extremely severely limit voting by immigrants, meaning mostly Catholics. But that never happened in New York.
Has this issue sort of ebbed and flowed based on the potential political power that could be executed by these demographics, or is it largely a consequence of just general racism?
Well, this is a key question. I think that in general, many people and even many historians have said disfranchisement flows from racism. I don't agree with that. I think that disfranchisement, whether in New York in 1821 or all over the United States in 2021, disfranchisement flows from a ruthless quest for partisan advantage. If, for the sake of argument, if as many African Americans voted Republican as they did in the 1940s when they supported Governor Tom Dewey, a strongly pro-civil rights Republican, and even a lot of them supported Rockefeller. I'm just using that as an example. If the African American vote was as open for contestation and as divided as it was, at least in some states where there were Republicans who deserved the name Republican, if I can put it that way, then I don't think you'd see these efforts to disfranchise them. So I think the racism is sure. When you read through, what some of the Martin Van Buren's bucktail Republicans were saying in 1820 and 1821, it sounds extremely racist, and I'm sure they meant it. But much more important was the desire to get rid of voters that you couldn't control and that would really come out and do you damage. And that's true now, and it was true 200 years ago. So I think we should avoid saying, well, this is about ideology and pathological hatred. No, it's about partisan advantage. And I'm not saying that to excuse these people. It makes it actually